Hello, proppers! Welcome back to the shop. In honor of St. Patrick's Day, we'll be honoring another iconic movie, Leprechaun. To create the head this time, I'll be using my newly acquired tool, a compact vacuum former. But instead of the usual laminated sheets, I'll be using 2mm EVA foam. Although I believe that this machine will not go any further than 4mm, I'm also going to try some 6mm. I'll be using my usual head rock for the molding process. I won't be highlighting the machine's process in this video. I'll leave a link in the description so you can see my first unboxing of this machine. After the sheet had completely cooled, I cut out the mold. The 2mm sheet was not structurally stiff enough for my Leprechaun's head, so I'm gonna improperly try to use the 6mm sheet inside my new little vacuum former. Although the 6mm sheet couldn't properly be clamped into the device, I held it down by hand and was able to complete the task. I carefully attached the two sheets with contact cement, then proceeded to create the back of the head. Instead of taking the chance of damaging my little machine, I decided to do the back of the head a little more conventionally. After the initial shape of the head is cut out, slots around the entire perimeter are cut out, and then I contact cement them into place. The two formed pieces are then contact cemented to each other. Being mindful of the curvature while attaching the two halves. After sanding down the seams, foam clay is used to skin the head. And a little water is used to smooth out the foam clay. I was able to find a couple of small pieces of 4mm EVA foam to create the ears. They were both attached to the head with tube epoxy. Being very careful to keep symmetry between the two ears. After attaching the ears, I got started on the body. I'll be using two pieces of 10mm EVA foam laminated together to make a one-piece body. As with many of my other builds, I'll be using pieces of Romex wiring snaked through the EVA foam so I can manipulate the structure. I give the first half of the body an initial sanding before creating the second half. After fold forming the wired section of the body, the arms are created. Slots are created on the shoulder section of the arms so they can be contact cemented between the two body halves. After applying contact cement to both sections of the body, the arms are attached. Then the unwired section of the body is carefully attached to the wired section following the curvature. Although the pre-wiring allowed me to manipulate the structure, I wanted to start off with the Leprechaun's basic posture. Romex wires are also channeled through the arms so that they can be manipulated, leaving a small section of wiring exposed to attach the hands. A final sanding of the entire body is completed before skinning it with foam clay. This helps to smooth out the body as well as cover the seams, but it's not entirely necessary because we will be adding clothes to our little friend. And my usual warning, yes, I know it looks a little rough at this point, but all of you know how I operate. This video will end with our little buddy in tip-top shape. I gather up all the scraps of material that I could find to see just how close we can get to his original attire. To replace his plaid shirt, I'll be using a piece of kente cloth, which would have been more appropriate for the Leprechaun in the Hood part of the series. With the rest of the scrap material, I was able to closely mimic his charmed attire. The material was hot glued to the body, adding as much detail as possible. To add dimension to the lapels of the jacket, separate pieces of material were attached to 2mm EVA foam. The lower sections of the legs were trimmed down, and the kente cloth was used to make his socks as well. Any excessive hot glue was carefully sanded down with my Dremel, but those areas will also be painted over later. I used a colored piece of 2mm EVA foam to create the inner lining of the tail of his jacket. Then the pants were created and attached to the legs. After the pants were completely attached, they were trimmed down to expose the socks. After a little more excessive glue sanding, the shoes were created from 10mm EVA foam. After attaching the shoes to the legs, a thin strip of material was added down the center of the shirt, and small buttons were made out of 2mm EVA foam. Small strips of white material were used to create the ruffled shirt sleeves. Then they were hot glued to the end of the arms. The shoes were trimmed down to shape and size, then the trademark buckles were created for them. Straps were created for the buckles, then they were contact cemented to the shoes. I got started on the details to the head by first marking and cutting out the opening for the mouth. Other facial details were first marked out and then created with foam clay. A little water was used to smooth out the facial details of the foam clay. The head was set aside to dry, then I got started on creating the hands. To create the base structure of the hands, I used foil and hot glue. The purpose of the hot glue was to have a softer material to insert the wired fingers into. The hands were pressed into the wired arms. The fingers were then created out of wire and then inserted into the hands. When I was satisfied with the basic form, everything was secured with hot glue. Foam clay was used to add flesh to the fingers. At this point, the foam clay on the head had set enough for me to complete the detailing. Sockets for the eyes were marked and cut out. After final smoothing of the facial features, the Dremel tool was used to make the final forming of the hands. If you're wondering about the insect spray can on the right, a pesky fly got into the shop and he doesn't understand that he's on a suicide mission. When the detailing of the hands are finished, I get started on the hair. Since I don't have any red hair available, I'm gonna have to create some for our little ginger buddy. Since I don't have any dye, I'll use some watered down acrylic paint on the white hair that I have left over from my Crypt Keeper build. I'll leave a link in the description so you can see that video if you haven't already done so. After mixing the hair into my watered down acrylic paint mixture, I set it aside to let it soak in. Since I haven't done this before, I have no idea how it's going to work out. I kept adding more paint to see if I can get a stronger mixture. While waiting for the color to soak into the hair, I went back to the head and created the lips with foam clay. I set the head aside again, allowing the foam to set before attaching the teeth and eyes. Getting back to the hair, I drained off all the excess liquid, then used paper towels to dry off the hair as much as possible. I also separated as much of the strands as I could without fraying the hair. It was time to create our little buddy's trademark hat. I angle cut a strip of 2mm EVA foam so that the base of the hat will be a little larger than the top. A strip of the same 2mm foam was used to reinforce the connecting seam. The top of the hat as well as the brim was made from the same size foam. All the connections were made with contact cement. To provide a larger surface to attach the top of the hat, I utilized small blocks of 6mm EVA foam. After checking the size of the hat on the head, I realized it was a little too small, but I decided to continue with the process and finish this hat off. That way I'd know exactly what to do when I make the larger version. After trimming the hat down to size, I attached the brim with hot glue, tacking the brim into position before running the full bead. The brim was marked and then trimmed down to size. A slight upward curvature was formed on the hat by hand before adding a bead of glue on the outside rim. Once again, I'm so sorry about all the horrible camera angles to this video. I'll make doubly sure that in future videos you won't have to put up with this. With the brim completed, I cut strips of 2mm EVA foam to create the hat band and buckle. Slots were cut out of the square buckles so the band could run through it. Both were attached to the hat with contact cement. A base coat of white plasti dip was applied to the hat and the head. At the same time, I created his pot of gold and gave that a coating of black plasti dip. I pulled out my intermittently working air gun and gave the head a nice base coat. Before it stopped working, I did the same to the hands. Then I went right back to the acrylic paint and brush. As usual, slots were cut out in the inside of the lips to accommodate the teeth. I initially started to make the teeth out of hot glue, but then decided to put in very small finishing nails. This feature added a little more fright to the project. The teeth are locked into place with crazy glue. I then attached and painted the tongue into the head, followed by the final painting of the face. The painted hair was then attached to the face and head. The shoes were painted black and the buckles silver. I used the same procedure to create the larger hat for the head and spray painted it green. Our little buddy got his final hair trimming and the head was attached to the body using Romex wiring. A dab of hot glue was used to hold the wiring in place. And then small holes were marked out and drilled into the body to insert the head. Before the hat was attached, the band was painted black and the buckle painted gold. At this point, I decided to change the color of the boot buckle from silver to gold. With our little buddy completed, all that was left to do was to mount him on a platform and complete his pot of gold. Stiff wiring were inserted into his feet for mounting. Corresponding holes were marked out and drilled through a platform. No, it's not a coincidence that his platform is right next to a big black pint. Small coins are punched out of 2mm EVA foam and thin cardboard. In hindsight, these materials should have been pre-painted in advance. I've made this mistake before, but I won't make it again. After all the coins were punched out, they were spray painted gold. The bottom of the cauldron was filled in to limit the amount of coins that I would have to make. The cauldron was filled with the coins and then hot glued into its proper position. This marks the end of our St. Patty's Day project. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, press that like button, and press the bell notification so you'll be notified for future projects.